Will RFK Jr. be confirmed by the U.S. Senate? He is one of President Trump's most controversial nominees. He says he's going to make America healthy again, but he's already made some enemies along the way. Here to bring some insight is Thérèse Boudreaux, the congressional reporter for the Center Square. Thérèse, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. So you've been covering these congressional hearings. You've watched the questions that lawmakers have lobbed at RFK Jr. You've seen his responses. What can you tell us about how he's performing? What are some common themes?
So, RFK Jr. is a pretty controversial nominee because, as he says in his own words, he's not afraid to ask the questions that he's not supposed to, essentially. And that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And so he said some things in the past about vaccine safety, questioning that, especially the COVID vaccine. And different things. He says that the rates of chronic disease are probably due to environmental factors, ultra-processed foods, stuff like that. So some of what he says is backed by science, like the ultra-processed foods. Some of it is kind of not what you're supposed to say, like with the vaccines. And so during the hearings, there were two of them. During the first hearing that I covered, it became pretty evident that a lot of senators, especially Democratic senators, but some Republicans too, were just very wary about that and wanted him to recant some of the things that he said or some of the things that they said that he said. And so I think he did pretty well. I mean, he's already passed, just barely, but he passed the Senate Finance Committee's vote. And so he's going to be on the floor. And it's hard to tell, but because he has full Republican support now, it seems, it looks like he will be confirmed, despite different hesitancies that people have. Vice President J.D. Vance also apparently was talking with some of the more hesitant Republican senators, like Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He said that J.D. Vance had talked with him and it had alleviated some of his fears. So it's definitely true that if RFK gets confirmed, he will not be a very establishment or expected administrator, but people think that he's going to make a lot of changes that they say are necessary, but there's definitely been some pushback.
Sure, yeah. I think on this issue, people feel there's a little bit, shouldn't use this word, but conspiracy behind the scenes because of large food companies, because of maybe pharmaceutical interests, healthcare industry. There's a lot of money going into Congress that has helped create this sort of established, approved points of view. And during COVID-19, I think for the first time, people who challenged the established, quote unquote science, actually sort of were proven right in a lot of ways about maybe the efficacy of the vaccine, or health officials said they overpromised on the vaccine and their claims didn't turn out to be true. Now the CIA is saying that, the virus may have come from a lab. And so I think generally Americans have lost some trust in the established institutions when it comes to food safety, when it comes to health. And I mean, just, my own experience and online, I see a lot of support, bipartisan support for RFK Jr. But many of these lawmakers, Republican and Democrat, were pretty skeptical of him. You wrote a story that I thought was very interesting about some of the funding that was going to lawmakers who are critical of RFK Jr. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so as I was watching the first hearing in particular, I was noticing just that some of the senators who happen to be Democrats were very antagonistic, not really letting him finishing his sentences, that kind of thing. And it just occurred to me, hey, maybe I should just check out their campaign finances on the Federal Elections Commission website. And what I found was that for three lawmakers especially, they had each received tens of thousands of dollars in 2024 alone. If I, going back even just into 2023, I was seeing that the money kept stacking up. But just with the time that I have of 2024 alone, they're receiving tens of thousands of dollars from pharmaceutical or healthcare industry-related companies, political action committees. And so if I pull it up right here, So the three lawmakers that I looked up were Sheldon Whitehouse, Michael Bennet, and Ron Wyden. And again, so I just noticed that they had many campaign contributions either in 2024 or in their most recent campaign from these different companies that would definitely have a stake in who leads the national health agencies. Now, that obviously doesn't necessarily mean anything nefarious, but it definitely raises some questions. And given the antagonism of those lawmakers and then some others, especially in the later hearing, Bernie Sanders, it was also very antagonistic, and Kennedy actually called him out on that, and it was a pretty amusing exchange. The main point, I think, is that RFK is definitely an unconventional candidate. He said some eccentric things, and people can argue about whether or not he's spread misinformation or whether he's just, questioning the status quo. But there are definitely people and organizations who have a financial stake in this matter.
Thanks, Thérèse Boudreaux. Great reporting from the Center Square.